We're officially in draft week of the NHL, and we'll be looking at this year's draft prospects. And joining me today is the host of Prospect Central and Sportsnet 650, as well as a producer and a play-by-play commentator for the PJHL. I'm here joined by Zach Clarke to help preview this year's draft class. Thanks, Zach, for showing up. How are you?
I'm doing great. You mentioned it. The draft is now just 1 week away. So excited to see how every franchise changes their hopes and dreams leading forward. Obviously, massive for us here in Vancouver, as this is the start of what's likely to be a lengthy rebuild, but you got to have a good foundation to have a good future.
We'll touch base of this team as well, but I learned that you're also an Ottawa Senators fan. So after that Brady Tkachuk trade, you must be intrigued with what they're going to do with the 9th pick as well. But before we get into the details of each team, what's your general thoughts of this draft class as a whole? Because beginning of the year, it was like clear cut. It's Gavin McKenna and then maybe Keaton Verhoff second. We've seen drafts in the past where Connor Bedard was the guy for 2 years, and he was clearly the guy. Macklin Celebrini was a guy for 2 years, and he was clearly the guy. This year, there were some people that even said McKenna is the better prospect heading into this year, but stuff has changed because even though he might go number one, it's not clear cut.
No, you nailed it. It's no longer clear cut. And you make a really good point about kind of looking back when it comes to these prospects, because if you asked experts, a couple years ago, Gavin McKenna was the clear cut. What he was doing for the Tigers, the stats that he had in the WHL, truly, truly incredible. But then you've got Ivar Stenberg, who kind of had a little bit of a meteoric rise. In fact, 2 to 3 years ago, Viggo Bjork was actually considered the better of the two Swedish prospects. But then Stenberg has a year in the SHL truly unparalleled. I mean, obviously the second best SHL draft eligible year, only behind Daniel Sedin, obviously a name people might recognize there. And so you're right, it's no longer clear cut. I still do anticipate Gavin McKenna being the number one, and I think that he deserves that. But Stenberg, I mean, he is right there. And I think the notion and the discussion over the past couple of weeks that San Jose might reach for a defender, Stenberg might fall, I think that's absolutely crazy. I think there's quite a lot of draft classes you could look back on and say Stenberg would be the number one overall prospect in this class. As for the draft as a whole, it's one of those drafts that I think this one, at least, looking ahead to it, looks to be a fairly average draft. It's better than some years. It's worse than some years. The couple of guys at the top looking pretty strong. What's interesting about this class is just how kind of in line and how in the same tier the defenders are. You talk about the number one defender in this class, there's like 3 to 4 different names that you could throw out there and have it kind of as a correct opinion. You've got guys like Keaton Verhoff, Chase Reed, Daxon Rudolph, Carson Carl's another big one. Even Albert Schmitz and Xavier Villeneuve are kind of up. So that is really interesting because usually you've got, at least in terms of positional value, a position where you can say, oh, this guy's the best at that position. It's so rare that you have guys that are so neck and neck up until draft day. And it makes it for a really exciting draft, especially when it comes to the defensive side of the puck. There's absolutely no one who knows what order those guys are going to go on draft day. And that just leads to more fun for guys like you and I.
So let's start off with the first overall pick. That is the Toronto Maple Leafs, who jumped up. Obviously, Vancouver fans here must hate that. You, as a Sens fan, must hate that as well. But they are, like you said, they're probably favored to take Gavin McKenna at this point. He still might be the number one guy because the Canadian aspect of it and all that. But if you were to put the odds out of 100, is it 50-50? Is it 70-30 in your opinion? 90-10, 85-15, whatever? How would you put the odds for Gavin McKenna going number one? And if not Gavin McKenna, is it straight up Ivar Stenberg, or are you going with one of the D-men at number one?
So I think given the fact that it is Toronto, they are going to want to place a forward there. I would put the odds for Gavin McKenna at probably around 95%, if not 100. I'm very certain that Gavin McKenna is going to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. And I think that's going to be an insanely interesting pick. I was saying on my show the other day, it's such a rare situation where the first overall pick goes to a team that's trying to be competitive right now. Usually it's a team that's either in the midst of a full rebuild or at the very least a retool. Toronto is going to try and, win the Stanley Cup next year with Gavin McKenna. And as such, it paints the picture for a really interesting rookie season. This could go down as one of the best rookie seasons we see in NHL history, or at least modern NHL history, given that he's going to likely get power play one time on what could now be the most loaded power play units in the league with the addition of Darren Radish. And there's a very good chance he's going to get playing time alongside Austin Matthews, or at the very least, John Tavares. Whether you look at some of the other first overall picks, and they're playing with a crop of players that are a lot worse. I think back to Connor Bedard, a prospect that I always loved watching, and someone that I had the fortune of knowing growing up in North Vancouver. and he's had absolutely no one elite to play with for the entire duration of his time in Chicago. So it's a very different situation for Gavin McKenna. I probably would have said that the odds were like 100% up until the hiring of Sundin and Chayka. I think that throws just a little bit of that Swedish connection into the mix. Sundin was rumored to have been, quite high on Stenberg, as he should be. He's an incredible prospect. But I'm very, very confident Gavin McKenna goes first overall. And I believe that to be the correct decision as well.
How would you compare him to Mitch Marner? Because people are saying he's an elite playmaking wing. Obviously, he needs to work on the other side of the puck as well. Whereas Marner was really good on the defensive side. At least he got better at it as his career went on. Is it like a direct comparison? Obviously, the Leafs, like this is a good scenario for whoever goes top two, because with the Leafs and San Jose going top two, those are teams that are looking to take the next step. In the Leafs case, obviously, assuming they keep Auston Matthews this offseason, try to get back into the playoffs. How would you describe is he like for like fill-in for Mitch Marner, Gavin McKenna, that is?
It's a pretty good comparison. I think that the Mitch Marner comps make a lot of sense. I think that a lot of it has been brought up because he's likely going to Toronto. Obviously, it just depends whether you believe in ranking a player's ceiling, a floor, or what you're hoping they end up being in a realistic scenario. I think that the absolute ceiling for Gavin McKenna, and obviously this is a very high ceiling, would be someone like Nikita Kucherov. He's so dynamic. The way that he sees the ice is incredible. He has such a knack for being able to find what I like to call the soft ice, if you will. The ice where he's going to be uncontested, even if it's just for a split second. That's all you need in hockey, is a split second. He has that just what am I trying to say here? The kind of offensive ability to make something out of nothing. You look like a play is already over. He's trapped along the boards and he escapes. I think that his mobility, especially in one-on-one, his edge work is a little bit better than someone like Mitch Marner. Where I do see the comparisons is somewhere like on the power play. The passing is very, very similar. Mitch Marner's always been the kind of guy who has a great ability to get a pass through the seam, through guarded areas when he's marked. Any of that stuff, Mitch Marner's always been good at, and I totally see the comparisons there for McKenna. I think that you made a great point, Emery, that Mitch Marner probably is a little bit better on the defensive side of the puck, and Gavin McKenna is a prospect where he does certainly have some flaws. Not only that, he does kind of have a tendency to try and do a little bit much himself, although I'm always intrigued to see when prospects, sometimes they can feel forced to do that when they are kind of the best player on a team, and I think McKenna has kind of always been the best player, at least offensively speaking, on any team that he's been on, even at the NCAA. So I'm intrigued to see whether that ends up changing at the NHL level, where, of course, you're no longer the best player on the ice like he's been so used to being a junior. But overall, I think that he at least as a ceiling, is going to have more to give than Mitch Marner did. And that's obviously very high praise, considering Mitch Marner had some incredible seasons in Toronto. But I'm very excited to see what he does. I think that the thing I'm most excited to see, and what Toronto Maple Leafs fans should be most excited to see, is this power play unit. Throwing in Gavin McKenna and Darren Radish over the offseason, and now you combine that with Matthews and Nylander, and then literally whoever else you want on that unit, it could end up being the best power play unit in the entirety of the NHL year one. That is assuming Darren Radish doesn't take a step back. But I am just so excited to see that. I think the playmaking of Gavin McKenna and the finishing ability of Auston Matthews is going to create a 1-2 punch that very few teams in the league are going to be able to match.
So with that being said, do you think Gavin McKenna will do in year one? Because we saw the highs of Connor Bedard in year one. We saw obviously what Macklin Celebrini has done. We even saw what Matthew Schaefer has done last year as a defensive side of things. Do you think Gavin McKenna can replicate and show everybody why he's a number one overall pick? Or do you think that he needs to maybe spend time away from the NHL to start the year as well? Because I guess this is where you could bring in now Ivor Stenberg, the 5% chance you said the Leafs might take him. He's the more pro-ready guys from what I've been hearing because of his time in the SHL.
Yeah, so I think that there is an argument to be made that Stenberg is the more ready guy. I think that he's a lot better on the defensive end of the puck as well. Not necessarily actually in his own zone, but he's so good at stopping the transition from the opposing team. He's so creative. But I still do believe McKenna is who they're going to go with. And I think that he's going to have a great rookie year. And I think that you can kind of back that up by looking at how he managed the NCAA. When he first joined Penn State, he had a really slow start. And everyone was saying, oh, man, it shows how hard the transition is. is he going to fall from number 1 overall? But then once he found his footing, he immediately turned into an elite player, posting, some hat tricks, some incredible multi-point efforts, some incredible overtime finishes. So I think that his rookie year in the NHL is likely going to parody his rookie year in the NCAA, where he might have a slow start. You could see 5, 10, even 20 games wouldn't surprise me where he looks a little bit average, or maybe not average is the right word, but very, very high and low, Jekyll and Hyde, if you will, where he's going to have some elite plays where you see why he went number 1 overall. And he's going to have plays where he gets absolutely burned. Whether it's the physicality along the boards, whether it's the up speed of the NHL, which is just so much higher than even the NCAA, he's going to get exposed in the first couple of games of the NHL. But I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that if you look at the back 40, 50 games of his rookie season, it's going to look incredible. And I also do firmly believe the Maple Leafs will start him in the NHL. There's obviously the option of keeping him in the NCAA, which most prospects in this draft are going to be looking to do, have another year, or maybe even 2 in the NCAA. McKenna strikes me as one of the few guys in this class, alongside someone like Stenberg, that is going to be able to step in the NHL right away. And even though he might have a little bit of a slow start, Leafs fans, do not give up on this guy too early. He's going to have a great rookie year. In my mind, you could pencil him in for the Calder, no problem.
So, okay, before we talk about the Sharks here, I just want to ask generically, how much stock do you put in the World Juniors performance? And then how much stock do you put in the Combine performance? Because that's where we saw the Stenberg rise, right? In the World Juniors. And Gavin McKenna got his quote unquote empty stats against the bad teams is what they said. And he was not a quote unquote, again, big time player. Although, and then one follow up on that as well. Penn State, not known for a hockey school as well. Like he could have easily went to BU, BC, Denver, wherever else. Like ultimately, he did go to a school that's primarily football in Penn State, right? So like, how would you put in stock of all of those 3 things that I just mentioned?
It's a great question, Amrit. I think that every single year we see prospects rise too far because of what they did at the World Championships, World Juniors. I think that tournaments in general should be evaluated with the remembrance that it is only a few games. Players can have a stretch of great games and be bad players, and vice versa. You can have a good player not have a great tournament, and that doesn't make them not a good player. I think the thing to remember with Ivar Stenberg is that not only did he have a great tournament, he had a great season as well. It's not like he just showed up, had a great tournament, and had average stats at the SHL. He literally had one of the best seasons of all time in what is commonly considered either the second best or third best hockey league in the entire world. And as you mentioned, it's an adult professional league. So he's already had that experience playing against guys who are a lot more physical and a lot faster. And that's a huge jump. The jump from juniors to professional hockey is the biggest jump that you can make in hockey at any level, counting everything. So the fact that Stenberg's already had that really does go to show just how incredible he is. For example, another player that had an incredible World Championships, but didn't have anywhere near the same production in the SHL, Viggo Bjork, and he's still commonly considered a top 10 pick who might have a chance of going in the top 5. So it just goes to show just how much better Stenberg's other accolades are outside of those tournaments, because you make a great point that, you cannot overvalue the tournaments. You can't undervalue the tournaments. What I do think you can undervalue is the Combine. I just don't put any stock in the Combine. I think that there's been way too many examples of players who have tested very, very poorly at the Combine and then gone on to have great careers. Because at the end of the day, the only thing you're going to be able to learn from the Combine is 2 things. Their physical ability off the ice, which is just, I think it's so overrated. Congrats. You've got a guy who can do 50 push-ups. Does that make him a good hockey player? No, not necessarily. I think the physical side of it is overrated. What I think teams do learn more of is the mental side. Obviously, the draft interviews, you get to ask prospects whatever you want to ask to learn how they think the game, to learn how they view the off-ice things, and how you get a little bit of a mentality side. And I think that's a lot more important. The mentality of hockey, the mentality of being a professional athlete, not everyone's cut up for it. You can be the best junior player in the world, and you won't have to put in half the work that's required to be an average NHL player. It's that next step. And so it gives teams an idea of guys that they think are going to fit in with their system, with their culture especially, and guys that they think are going to be able to put in the work ethic. And so I do think that the physical side of the Combine is overrated, but I think that the mental side of the Combine is very important. And I think that a lot of teams will choose prospects based on how they interview. And so I think we heard from the Combine, there was a lot of guys who teams felt interviewed very well and could be future leaders in the NHL. And likewise, there was a lot of guys who didn't interview very well. Ivar Stenberg being one of them. Now, to be fair, it has been noted that it's not a secret. For years, he's always been a little bit more of a shy, reserved personality. That's fine. That doesn't make you not a good hockey player. But I think that is something that teams certainly took into account, is how players interview, because at the end of the day, you're not just hiring a player who's going to be an on-ice guy for you. This is a guy who off-ice has to blend well with the team, with the players on your team. It has to be, you've got to be a band of brothers. And on top of that, you've also got to be representing your city. This is a guy who you want to be the representation of your city to all of your fans, to the young kids, someone that's going to be looked up to for ideally decades to come. And so I think that teams do put a lot of stock into the interview side of the combine, which I think should be. But I love the point you made off the top there, Emery. You cannot put too much stock in short tournaments, even if players have incredible performances.
Okay, I got to ask you about the interviews very quickly, just a funny way. Do you understand the weird questions that they ask sometimes?
So yes and no. Here's the thing. I think that it's one of those things with the weird questions is the teams go into asking those weird questions. They want certain answers in mind, or they're trying to elicit, whether it's certain answers, certain reactions, certain responses. So I'm going to give a couple examples, because you're right. There were certainly some weird questions. The Montreal Canadiens had one that I thought was a little bit more understandable. They're, by the way, a team that is known for asking really weird questions. I liked their one where they asked prospects, to throw a puck into a garbage bin. What they did was they told the prospect, we want you to throw this puck into the garbage bin from as far away as you feel comfortable. So some prospects only went a couple feet. Some went the entire distance of the room. And then after they chose how far away they were throwing the puck, the Montreal Canadiens then said, if you miss this, you will never play for the Montreal Canadiens. The pressure that puts on is incredible. And so obviously that then elicits different reactions. I think that a negative reaction would be a prospect not living up to the pressure and saying, oh, can I change where I'm standing? I want to go closer because I want to play for you guys. That seems like a positive. It's not. You don't want a prospect that's going to crumble under pressure. Then you've got the guy who throw it and miss. And I do wonder whether they actually will follow up on their words, whether they've got a guy that they loved. Oh, he missed the bucket. Guess we can't draft him. Sorry, McKenna, you missed the bucket. We're not having you, buddy. So I think that it is interesting. Some of the other questions that I really didn't like, another very controversial one was the one where you're stranded on a desert island.
Yeah.
You're there with one other person. He has a bottle of water. Would you kill the other person to take the bottle of water? And supposedly what the team wanted to hear was because you want the ruthlessness. You want the guy who's going to do whatever it takes to win. Where I have a lot of issue with that is that theoretically, if we're talking about actual survival situations here, it's way better to work as a team and have two brains trying to figure things out. You've got two guys who can do things at once. And I also would think you would want a guy that tries to work together with a team. So some of the questions make no sense to me, but I will say that obviously with each team, you got to think less about the question and more about what that specific team is trying to elicit from the player. So some teams, I think, ask ridiculous questions. And some of them you kind of understand the logic behind. Some of them are just like, what are we doing here, guys? We're just trying to troll these 17-year-olds who are just getting their first taste of NHL action. But overall, the combine, it's important. There are some questions that I think you don't have to ask.
So moving on to the number 2 pick now, after taking a look at a recap of what you all mentioned. You mentioned earlier that you would take whoever is not taken first between McKenna and Stenberg at number 2, which is the best player available. But there's obviously a lot of talk about fit. And my brother and I, we discussed this on camera, off camera, about how we would always take best player available. I don't know if you're a basketball guy, but for example, last year, the San Antonio Spurs were the 2nd overall pick. They were coming off a trade from De'Aaron Fox. They already drafted Stephon Castle. The number 2 overall pick was supposed to be Dylan Harper, but they could have easily taken Con Kneppel or easily could have taken VJ Edgecombe, for example, but they picked the best guy available. Although the regular season may have been meh, he proved it in the playoffs time why he was the guy to go 2nd overall. So in this case, the San Jose Sharks already have Macklin Celebrini, need a lot of help on defense, drafted Michael Misa last year when Schaefer went number 1. Do they take Stenberg or McKenna, or do they go for whoever the best D-man, according to you, is available and fill in the need with one of their prospects they already have in Sam Dickinson?
Well, this has probably been the biggest conversation leading up to the draft, is the unknown entity that is the San Jose Sharks. And by the way, with a lot of people freaking out about Toronto getting 1st overall, I think it's actually way more understandable to think about San Jose getting second overall. This is a team that landed a generational player with one of the best seasons in recent memory on an ELC that we've ever seen. And now they get second overall, where they're going to get another generational player. I think it would go down as one of the biggest mistakes in the NHL draft if they go for a defenseman over Ivar Stenberg. And it's interesting because the reporting has flip-flopped a little bit, but as of right now, it certainly does seem like they're going to go for Stenberg, which is 100% the right call. The thing is with San Jose is they're in a very fortunate position where you're right, they have an incredible forward core, but they actually almost have too many forward prospects. You look at the incredible amount of forward prospects they almost have too many to give meaningful playing time. You don't want to have a guy who you feel could be a top 6 forward learning in the 4th line where he's getting 8 minutes a night. That just isn't good for him. And so what I think the San Jose Sharks will do, and what I think is the correct decision, is they'll draft Stenberg and then they'll cut off the fat. Whatever top offensive prospects that they don't feel will be a future part of their top 6, they will package alongside some future picks to get some help on the defensive end. I think that if it was closer between the number 1 defenseman, who, by the way, for my money is Chase Reed, if it was closer between someone like Chase Reed and Ivar Stenberg, I think you could very well make a justifiable decision, because you're right, San Jose desperately need defensive help. If they can get the defensive side of the puck figured out, they could be a legitimately competitive team as soon as next year. But I think that that's all the reason why they don't draft a defender, because none of these defenders, outside of maybe Albert Schmitz, strike me as insanely NHL-ready defenders. I think that some of them could maybe play in the NHL this year, but they're not going to have great rookie years. It's going to be a lot of learning curve, which makes sense. It is completely understandable. But I think for a team like San Jose, who's really trying to exit the rebuild and now be a competitive team, and they almost made the playoffs last year, it makes sense that they would want to add an elite forward prospect who is one of the most NHL-ready prospects in the entire draft, and then they can trade some of the other guys for a defenseman who's going to be able to help them right now. And I think if they do that, which also is, in my mind, the most likely outcome, it's going to set them up to be one of the best teams in the West for upwards of a decade.
Not that it happens often. Will and or should they look for a possibility to trade down?
No, I don't think so at all. Again, I think that you could justify it if Stenberg was kind of a similar tier of prospect to the other top forwards or other defensemen. He's just too good. This is a class where for the last 9 months, we have known it is a number 1, number 2, everybody else. You can't trade down. I think that other teams could trade down. I'm interested to see if Vancouver might make a move like that. Chicago probably not, but some of the other teams around there certainly could. Ottawa is a team that I think will certainly be moving that 9th overall pick for immediate help. But I think if you're San Jose, it just doesn't make sense to trade down. It's also one of those things where when you trade down, you have to think about the realistic prices for that. And a team trading up would have to pay so much. I think the only team that would make sense, and the kind of Chicago
I was about to go there. I was about to cut you off and say, how desperate should Chicago try to trade up to pair Bedard with Stenberg or McKenna?
Well, 100%. From Chicago's point of view, it makes a lot of sense. But to move up those 2 spots, it's tough off the top of my head to think of a fair trade comparison, because you just don't see top 10 picks moved very often, let alone top 5 or even top 3 picks moved. In a vacuum, it would make sense. Let's say San Jose made up their mind that they wanted Chase Reed at 2, then you could make an argument that would make sense. But again, I just don't know that Chicago would be willing to pony up the dough that it would require. It would probably require at least another 1st-round pick to move up just 2 spots. It sounds like a lot, but that's the difference that we're talking about here between 2nd overall and 4th overall. And so it's one of those things where, again, if San Jose knew in their heart of hearts they wanted Chase Reed, I could maybe see a world where it gets done. But I think the price would just be too much for Chicago to pay. And I don't think that San Jose is going to pass on Ivar Stenberg.
All right, time to talk about that 3rd overall team, a team that my brother and I are big fans of, a team that you in the city that you work at, and the station that covers the Vancouver Canucks. So in this case, let's start. We'll play a couple of hypotheticals. Let's just say McKenna and Stenberg are taken. Number 3 option, scenario number 1. Who cares where they're from? Who cares about position of need? Who are you picking if you're the Vancouver Canucks?
It is tough because I have flip-flopped a little bit. I am going to go with Caleb Malhotra, which up until David Pagnotta's report a couple days ago seemed like the dead set option. I mean, if you looked at the betting odds, Malhotra was overwhelmingly the favorite to go 3rd overall. But then David Pagnotta of the fourth period reports that he feels certain the Canucks will not take Caleb Malhotra, which really throws a wrench into the works. Now, as you said, let's ignore the reporting. You're asking me my opinion of who I think should go third overall. I don't want the Canucks to take a defenseman. I've outlined on my show that I just think that they have so many better defensive prospects than they do forwards right now. You look at Zeev Buium, and the biggest question right there is whether or not you believe Zeev Buium to be the number one of the future. I do. Zeev Buium had the best 2-year stretch from an NCAA defenseman that we've ever seen. I still think he's going to be a number one defenseman, and as such, you cannot draft a number one defenseman in this class. Therefore, you're drafting a forward. And then it really comes down to probably one of two names. As you said, if McKenna and Stenberg are gone, then it's probably either Caleb Malhotra or Viggo Bjork. These guys are awesome. You could go either one of these, and I'm a happy camper at the end of the day. For me, Caleb Malhotra edges out just a little bit. That playoff run he had was so special. I think that people try and kind of say the counter argument of, oh, he was playing with really good players. There was a ton of first-round picks. I believe 7 first-round picks, either already first-round picks or projected first-round picks on that Brampton roster. Or Brantford roster, pardon me. And despite that, he was head and shoulders clear, the best player on that team from the kind of last half of the regular season and then forwards. The impressive thing with Malhotra is just the meteoric rise that he's had. With prospects, you really need to see continuous improvement. He went from being a middle six BCHLer to one of the best forwards in the OHL in one season. Now, that can be a little scary. Just, he jumped that far. Is he going to be able to jump that far again? He doesn't need to jump that far again. He only needs to continue to jump a little bit, and he can be an elite NHL player. That playoff run, people talk about it being good. I think that good sells it really short. When you look at draft-eligible OHLers who led their team in the playoffs and made it to at least the conference finals, since 2015, there is just 4 names on that list. Let me know what you think of these 4 players. Connor McDavid, Nick Suzuki, Mitch Marner, and Caleb Malhotra. Now, obviously, it's a small sample size, but those guys, they were all right. They panned out okay. And so I think the Canucks...
Yeah, no biggie. One of them happens to be the best player in the world, like whatever.
Exactly. But, and even the other two, you are very happy if you get those guys.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to temper expectations a bit. I don't necessarily think that he's going to step in and be a 100-point NHLer, but he's really well-rounded. He's a play driver, which is something that I absolutely love. I think there's a lot of guys in this class who have elite offensive talent, but don't drive play, and that's why they're falling. Someone like, for an example, Nikita Klepov, he led the entire OHL in points as a draft eligible. He beat out some guys who are in their 20s. Despite that, he's probably going to go in the late 20s of this draft because he is a perimeter guy. He's not really much of a play driver. He relies on other guys to set things up. He will finish. He will be able to create plays, but he's not going to be able to drive the offense. Malhotra does. On top of that, he's solid enough defensively, and then there's the coaching connection. Now, you can argue whether that's a positive or a negative. I've said I think it's a negative. I think that there's going to be a lot more eyes on him. There's going to be a lot more scrutiny on him. I just don't see any way where it is a positive. Despite that, I don't think it's enough of a negative that you should draft someone that you don't think is the best player available. I think he's the best player available. That being said, I do want to stress it is by the tiniest margin. Viggo Bjork is absolutely in the same tier. And there is people who can make a very good argument that Viggo Bjork should go third overall. I would listen to that argument. My personal feelings is Caleb Malhotra should go third overall. But if you've got Viggo Bjork, I understand.
Yeah, like obviously you're going to have fans that are going to be tired of taking Swedes, which is why it brings my next question to you. Did you buy the speculation that if Stenberg, I guess in McKenna, but in this case, Stenberg was available at 3, that they were still going to go Caleb Malhotra? Because I know the obvious answer is you go Stenberg, no doubt about it. But do you buy that they were always going to take Malhotra until the most recent reporting by, like you said, by David Pagnotta?
Well, you're right that there kind of was that inkling that Stenberg somehow might slip to the Blackhawks at 4. That's ludicrous. I just cannot foresee a universe that happens. Again, Stenberg is a prospect where if it wasn't for Gavin McKenna, he would be so the chew-in number 1. We wouldn't have even been talking about it. This would have been decided in like November. Stenberg is that good. So you're right. If he's on the board, you don't run, you sprint. I don't care if you fall over, you sprint to the draft table and you announce you're picking Ivor Stenberg. The term generational gets thrown around too much, so I'm not going to label him that. If he's not quite generational, he's like the 99% of the way there. So I don't buy into the reporting that the Canucks would pass up on that. I think that you're right. You make a good point that people do have a bit of what we've been calling Swede fatigue. working for a big media company where people do text in a lot, we do get to see and poll a large public opinion. And there's a lot of people in this market that are going to be upset if you draft a Swedish player. To those people, how do I put it lightly? You're not smart. You cannot pass up on,
well, I'm in the same boat as you.
Player possible. You cannot pass up on the best player possible because of where he was born. What are we doing here, guys?
Yeah.
People act like Swedish players can't be good. Like some of the best hockey players of all time haven't been Swedish. Some of the best players in Vancouver history have been Swedish. So I think that notion is ludicrous. I think that if that is the deciding factor, then you have completely lost the plot. Thankfully, I don't think that pressure has gotten to the Canucks from all the reporting I've been hearing. I don't think that factors into their decision at all, as it shouldn't. I think that if you had two prospects that were the exact same tier, you could use that as a tiebreaker, sure. But I just think that's a silly way of looking at things. And fans who have Swede fatigue, it's solely because of one guy. You can say his name. He's not going to come out of the walls. Yeah. He's Elias Pettersson, and I understand why fans. You're upset with him. What has happened to him is truly unprecedented in NHL history. You cannot let that dissuade you from taking Swedish players.
I mean, people forget that Petey was amazing for the first 5 years of his career, essentially. Right? Like, obviously, you're looking at the last 2-3 years where he kind of taken a step back, and we're hoping that he takes a step forward or whatever the case might be. I guess the other one you could kind of look at is Jonathan Lekkerimäki as well, who's obviously been injury prone so far throughout his career. And even people saying passing up on Zach Benson for Tom Wielander. Listen, I understand it was a little bit of a need in that time, but I'm still high on Tom Wielander. I don't know about you, but when it comes to the Canucks prospects as a whole, we'll see what ends up happening now with that side of things. But moving on to the defenseman, though, I do want to, because obviously now I feel like this is where the defenseman territory might come in. Maybe you said Viggo Bjork. How do you rank the defensemen, in your opinion, the top 5 defensemen in this draft that can get taken?
So Chase Reed is my number one. I think what he's done for the Sioux Greyhounds is actually incredible. Watching him carry the puck on his stick is something special. He is by far and away the best transitional defenseman in this class. You need a guy to get the puck from behind your own net to the attack. You get Chase Reed. Where I think that you see some of his blemishes and why you don't necessarily, why he's not the consensus number one overall, albeit largely probably the best defenseman in this class, but he's not consensus. He does have some blemishes. When you look at the one-on-one defending, it's not perfect. We look at him along the boards, again, not perfect. He's not. The thing is with Chase Reed is there's nothing where you look at his game. He's not terrible at anything. Whether I think some of the other top defenders of this class, you can point to some kind of qualities where maybe terrible is a bit harsh for a top 10 pick, but bad. Chase Reed doesn't have anything that's truly bad. I think there are some qualities where you can argue some defensemen in this class might be a little bit better at, but he is an elite offensive defenseman. If there is a defenseman in this class, I don't think there is, but if there is a defenseman in this class, it's going to turn into a Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes-esque defender, the kind of guy who does it all by himself. It is absolutely Chase Reed. No one else of the defenders in this class has the same do-it-himself factor that Chase Reed does, and that is why he's so appealing as the number one defenseman. Right behind him, I've got Carson Karls. Now, Carson Karls might be better offensively Chase Reed, not individually, but in terms of setting up his team, he's probably the best power play quarterback in this class. Him or maybe Xavier Villeneuve. He had an excellent playoff run. He's also, just from the reporting out of the WHL, he's a really big leader. He's really well-liked. He interviewed very, very well. Teams are very high on his character. And on top of that, a factor that people have been talking about, I did just say we shouldn't factor nationality in. With all the American players defecting on their teams, is considering that the gap between Reed and Karls is not a big gap. I do wonder if a Canadian team looks at that and then chooses Karls over Reed. And I wouldn't necessarily hate that. I think Karls is awesome. I think he's right there with Reed. Then in my mind, there's a bit of a gap. Now, Keaton Verhoff might have the highest ceiling of all the defenders in this class. I think that his stock dropped a lot because he had an okay year at the NCAA. I think that offensively he had a very good year. And I think that people don't rate that enough. He had a very, very good offensive year for North Dakota. Where the blemishes are defensively, he was absolutely rocked in the NCAA playoffs. I think back to the game they were eliminated in the NCAA playoff semifinals against Wisconsin. It literally looked like Wisconsin had drawn up their game plan to expose Keaton Verhoff. Multiple goals against were because they caused him to panic. And that's something that is really scary with Verhoff, is when the game speeds up, especially in his own end, he can tend to panic. trying to get the puck off the glass, shoot it over, just trying to get it out of his zone, throwing up the middle, gets taken away. He can have some boneheaded errors. Now, make no mistake, I think that people are a bit harsh on Verhoff because he made that decision to challenge himself. He already was an elite defenseman of the WHL, and no one will know if he had stayed in the WHL what his draft season would look like. We might be talking about him as the number one defenseman in this class if he had a better CHL season than Reed, Karls, etc. But no, he made that decision because he wanted to challenge himself against the best players. I think that should be commended. The decision-making scares me because when the game speeds up, well, what's faster than NHL hockey? Nothing. If NCAA is too fast for him, he's not going to thrive in the NHL. That being said, it was, there was clips that circulated in social media that made people think that's how he plays all the time. No, it was a few plays where he got exposed. At the end of the day, he still should be one of the top defenders in this class. You shouldn't forget what he did for the Royals. That was an incredible year he had out in Victoria in the WHL. And again, offensively, he had a perfectly acceptable year at Nodak. So I think that he should still be a consensus top defender in this class. He's just maybe a little bit more high risk, high reward than someone like Reed or Karls. So he's probably my third. Shaping out 4 and 5, I really like Daxon Rudolph. Talking to some people, there's some people who have Rudolph as the best defender in this class. He had an incredible playoffs for the Prince Albert Raiders. The offense flowed through him. Make no mistake, they had some other great players, such as Canucks top prospect Braden Coots, and some other elite players as well. I look to Cripps as well, who's going to be a top player in next year's draft class. But make no mistake, Daxon Rudolph was the engine of an offense that made it all the way to the finals. He is going to be incredible. He's less of a defensive stalwart than some of the other guys. He is going to be a little bit more of a guy who you draft for the offense than someone else. But for me, he slots in at 4. My 5th is Albert Schmeetz. Schmeetz is one of those interesting guys where when I talk to North American prospects or anyone that's kind of just a general prospect expert, they love Schmeetz. But when I talk to European prospect experts, the guys that have really gotten to watch him in person, gotten to really watch a ton of his game tape, none of them have been high on him. In fact, I've been told by a lot of them that he's nothing more than a third pairing defenseman. The reason why you take Schmeetz is if you want a guy who's going to be NHL ready and step in right away. I had said on my show that I felt 100% certain that if Florida didn't trade their pick, that was who they were going to go, because I think Schmeetz is going to step in right away and look like an NHL defenseman. The question with him is his ceiling. And honestly, I buy into that. I don't think he's ever going to be a first pairing defenseman in the NHL. I think you're lucky if he's a second pairing defenseman in the NHL. Do I think that a stalwart third pairing defenseman is valuable? Absolutely. We see it in the playoffs every year. You have to have a good third pair or you will get exposed. Schmeetz is going to be a great, bottom 4 defenseman for whatever team takes him. I just don't see him having anywhere near the same ceiling as the 4 other defenders that I've mentioned. So that is my number 1 through 5.
So, okay, so now that we talked about some of the forwards, you talked about now the defensemen, if you were to very quickly put your big board, like you're making the draft picks, it doesn't matter where you're picking, who are your top 5 players that in this draft class overall? Because you just list them out.
So I would take McKenna first overall to the Leafs. I would take Stenberg second overall to the Sharks. Malhotra third overall to the Canucks. Vigo Bjork fourth overall to the Blackhawks. That's a pick that I hope happens. I think that Vigo Bjork is an incredible player. I think the biggest thing with him is because of the size. You question whether or not he's going to be able to stay as a center in the NHL. Don't make him a center in the NHL. Put him on Bedard's wing. Finally give Bedard someone better than Tyler Bertuzzi or Teravainen to play with. Please help out Connor Bedard. He's such a good player. He's drowning alongside plumbers and painters, as they say, in Chicago. I think Vigo Bjork would be an elite pick there. He is so good. 5th overall is where it gets really interesting because the Rangers just could take literally anyone and it would be a fair enough pick. I think that's where Chase Reed goes. I understand people who might say, why would they take Chase Reed? They've got Adam Fox kind of locked up for a while. If this is a Rangers team that's going to have to enter a rebuild, then they do have to start thinking about their future. I think Chase Reed, American-born defenseman, it makes a lot of sense for them. At that point, he will be the best player available on the draft board. And so even if he does have to, not play first-line minutes, that's fine. You don't want to always have to throw prospects into the fire. And especially if you're a team like the New York Rangers, who have to be the worst team for a prospect to go to. I mean, that is where prospects go to die, is the New York Rangers, that would be fine. I think you want to be able to give a longer leash to whoever they draft. So if Chase Reed gets the chance to learn behind an American defender like Adam Fox, who can kind of teach him the ways of the game, and you give Reed sheltered minutes, whether that's in Hartford or whether that's on the bottom pairings of the Rangers, I think it makes a lot of sense. So for me, that's how I see the top 5 going. But that's the fun of this draft class specifically, is really those picks could be shaken up drastically, and it wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, this is assuming Adam Fox doesn't get traded as well, with some
yes, of course.
With that. I mean, you got my brother smiling. He loves Vigo Bjork because, like, yeah, when we did a reaction on the Brady Tkachuk trade, he said, "Oh, if Ottawa somehow he drops to number 9, then it's like, oh, he could be playing in Ottawa right away."
I would love that. Yeah. There's no way he drops to 9.
So, like, let's transition there then very quickly. Then with the like, you don't need to react to the trade necessarily, but the Senators at 9-25, obviously. I was saying if Jason Robertson wants to become a Senator, you maybe go get Jason Robertson because he's going to at least be a like for like-ish type in terms of skill level and talent, maybe, that when you lose in Brady Tkachuk. But as a Sens fan, how do you see them playing out this draft with the 9-25 and the 32nd pick?
It's tough because right now, just being honest, Ottawa is not a destination players seemingly want to go to. We have seen so many players force their way out, whether it's DeBrincat, Tkachuk, and now we've heard reporting that Jason Robertson has said he will not get a long-term extension in Ottawa.
Well, there goes my idea.
I know it sucks because as you mentioned, as someone who does root for the Senators, that's exactly what I wanted them to do, was flip those picks however you have to the Stars to get Jason Robertson. Because from all intents and purposes, it does sound like Jason Robertson's time in Dallas is probably coming to an end, which is crazy. He's such an incredible player. It was blasphemy that the United States left him home. I guess you can say it worked out. So
yeah, that's why. Like, I can't even say anything. I wanted to yell at them on the sake of United States fans, but I can't, because at the end of the day they got the job done.
Exactly, but it was still crazy. Jason Robertson is an incredible elite first line winger. He would crack the first line of almost any team in the National Hockey League. But unfortunately, it does sound like Ottawa's not going to be able to land him. Now that makes things really, really tough for Ottawa. This is a team that ideally, in a perfect universe, does not want to make any of these picks. This is a team that's trying to be competitive now. They want to be in their Stanley Cup contention window. They've been, a playoff team that's been a first-round exit for a couple years now. They want to make that next step, and as such, I think that they're going to try and trade for help. The issue is right now, you look at the NHL, and I mean, the market is unfathomably expensive. I mean, it's kind of good for the Canucks right now as one of the very few selling teams in the NHL. Their price is going to be so inflated, you might somehow get a first-round pick for Jake DeBrusk.
That's what I was like. Can we interest you in Jake DeBrusk? Can we interest you in Jake DeBrusk, Philip Hronik, Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson?
Yeah, well, people seem to really want to ship those to Ottawa. I'll say from a Vancouver side, yay. From an Ottawa side, nay. I'm not necessarily high on any of those players. PD, I want him to bounce back, but I'm just not certain he will.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to reset my face cam focus as it's decided to go completely blurry. Anyways, I do think that Ottawa does try and shop these picks. My issue is just for what? There's so little going around right now with so few selling teams. Ottawa could do a bunch of things that wouldn't surprise me. They're going to try and shop those picks, but they've got 6 days to do it. And if they don't, they're going to have to walk up to the board and make those picks. And if they do, it's tough. That's the area of the draft that just gets so murky because you could go any which way. I look at a guy like Ethan Belchetz, I wonder about. Ottawa has kind of shown that they want to get forward help and especially help on the wing. Well, Belchetz is playing in their backyard. Windsor Spitfires, 6'4" winger who had an incredible year. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see him in the playoffs as he sustained a season-ending injury, but by all sounds, it's not an injury anyone in the draft is concerned about long-term. So he's someone that I wonder is he'll probably be going around that range. He's a prospect that I personally am actually quite low on. There's quite a lot of wingers in the OHL that I'm not super high on, such as Belchetz, such as Adam Novotny. But obviously, my opinion does not constitute the opinion of an NHL general manager. Yeah. And so I'm very intrigued to see how it goes. But that kind of range of the draft, the kind of, let's say 6 to kind of 15 range is just going to be so interesting to me because there's so many players that could rise, fall. Wyatt Cullen's a guy that could go as high as 8 or 9 or as low as the 20s. There's several prospects around that area. And so it makes it a tough draft to predict.
All right. So we're going to do some rapid fire here a little bit. So we'll start off with the first one. You kind of alluded to it. Who's the biggest wild card of this draft? Because you kind of alluded to it being Keaton Verhoff. Is that also a guy like Tynan Lawrence, maybe Caleb Malhotra? If you were to answer that, who's the biggest wild card?
I'm going to go with a few ones here because if we're talking wild card in guys that could move around the most in the draft, I actually wonder like a guy, Alexander Command out of Sweden. So he's a guy that largely throughout the year was mocked at kind of the very tail end of the first round, early second round. Now there are teams that are really, really high on him, and understandably so. He's a great leader. He has a little bit of a rat-like tendency, and now we've kind of heard rumors that he might go in the top 15. And so if we're talking about a guy who is a wild card and could go anywhere in the draft, that's someone that if you're going anywhere from 10 to 30, that's a wild card in my mind. Wyatt Cullen's another one I touched on. He's one that people love with over the last couple of years, or sorry, couple of months rather, playing for the United States, playing the NCAA. He's so fast. He does a lot of great work down the wall. And I think for teams that want to add a scoring winger and add some speed to their team, he might be a little bit too tantalizing of a prospect to pass up on. But he's another one that it wouldn't shock me if he ends up going right in the tail end of the single digits or falls to the 20s. So I think there's quite a few wild cards in this draft. Another one that I like is Maddox Dejanay. He is someone that I wake up each morning and pray will be available at 24th overall. I absolutely love him. He is point per game in the QMJHL as a play driving center. And on top of that, he has a 4-minute compilation of absolutely dusting guys with reverse hits. He's so good at protecting the puck. He's so physical. I forget what his combine listed height and weight was, but it's somewhere in the realm of 6'4", 220. He's someone that has enough offensive upside to matter while being an absolute tank on skates. You want to talk about wild card, he's another guy that we've heard rumors might crack the top 15, but by some mocks is going to be available there in the 30s. So there's quite a lot of wild cards in this draft. I don't have time to run through them all because you mentioned it. There's so many guys that could rise up and down, but I think those are 3 names that could rise or fall by up to 20 picks.
Next one, who will be, in your opinion, the biggest steal of the draft? A guy you could see falling and someone in the teens might be like, all right, let's go. We got this guy.
This is a great question. The thing is there's several ones. I think by far and away the biggest one is the Ruck twins. I think that it was one of those things where they went from being underrated to heavily overrated, and then they kind of stayed at this plateau for so long that they're kind of falling to being underrated again. If these guys go in the second round, I will question NHL general manager's sanity through all 32 teams. These are guys that, were first and third, or first and second, either first and second or first and third, pardon me, I don't have the numbers right now, in WHL scoring, led the Medicine Hat Tigers, who have very little else offensively, to a conference finals boost. And on top of that, they do a lot themselves. I've talked about how much I like guys who are really able to drive play and don't necessarily need help. They both do that. Now, they elevate with each other, which is where I think a lot of teams do question splitting them up. And I think that is why they are going to fall. Is simply just that question of, okay, they're so good with each other, but they've never not played with each other. And at the Combine, they said to NHL teams, hey, we want to play with each other. As such, if they fall to the second round and either Vancouver or Calgary, which are the realistic options at getting both, end up taking both of them, I think that will be the absolute steal of the draft. They're going to be NHLers. And on top of that, it would not shock me to see them, especially if they go to the same team, as first liners. And if you're getting first liners at the tail end of the first draft, that's an absolute steal. One question that I have, and this is one of those things where as a Sens fan, I don't necessarily love it, but as someone who covers the Canucks, I would love it. 25th overall, the pick right behind the Canucks Wild pick, is now owned by the Ottawa Senators. Do they trade that pick to the Canucks for a forward, whether that's DeBrusk, whether that's Petey, or some defensive help like Filip Hronek? If the Canucks get 24 and 25, I would absolutely love them to get the Ruck twins. So I think that the Ruck twins would be steals of the draft. I do want to give a couple other names because I think that that's a little bit of a cop-out answer. One that I'm quite high on that I don't see a whole lot of other people talking about is Samu Alalari out of Finland. He's largely mocked to go in the kind of middle of the second, late second, maybe even early third round. 6'2", 200-pound right shot defenseman out of Finland, 25 points in 40 games in their top junior league. On top of that, has represented Finland, I believe, 7 different occasions. He's a staple of their national team. And then when you look at the analytics side of things, analytics, we know it's the way that the modern NHL is working. The best teams right now are the teams that do rely on analytics. Well, when NHLE published their final data, Samu Alalari was 30th overall. For a guy who's going to be going around the 40s, 50s, I love that pick as a steal of the draft. I think that he is going to have an NHL career. And when you look at the second round, only about 30% of those guys turn into NHLers. So I think that would also be one. One last name. This is one that has been talked about a lot more. So I'm certainly not going to be the first guy to tell you this name, Jack Hextall. he might sneak into the second round, and he absolutely shouldn't. That guy's a first rounder through and through. Now, if a team ends up finding him available in the second round, they should take him, and he will be a steal.
All right, so I got to ask you about the Ruck Twins then very quickly, because do you think the Sedins do it? Because they are the co-pohos, and do you think that about 20-ish, 20 plus years now, 25, 26 years later, that they could they do what Brian Brigg did for them, except albeit not in the top 5, but in the bottom half of that draft?
If they can make a swing for the Senators' 25th pick, then I think absolutely. I do question. I think that there is a little bit of a risk simply because you've got the wild card of both. You know the players want to play with each other. So if you draft one and another team takes another, do you now have that fear of looking over your shoulder of, once his rights expire with us, is he going to request a trade to join his brother? Albeit vice versa for the other team that might take him. I think that the team that wants to get the Ruck Twins is a team that feels like they're really going to be able to get both. Now, the Canucks are well positioned to do this, whether that's at 24 and 33, whether that's at 33 and 41. I don't think they're going to be available at 41. I think that it's either going to be the Canucks or the Flames that try to pull the trigger on that. And those are also the teams that the Ruck Twins are likely going to want to go to. They are Canucks fans growing up in the Osoyoos area. They've played together. They've been Canucks fans, but of course they'd love to stay in Western Canada. Calgary is not too far out either. And so I think that the Ruck Twins likely will go to one of those, or at least likely / hopefully will go to one of those teams if they do end up going to the same team. As to whether or not the Sedin Twins could make it happen, I hope they do. I think it's ridiculous that the Ruck Twins are going to go at the end of the first round. I almost think that if they had the exact same profile, but they weren't twins, they were playing on separate teams, we would be talking about these guys in the teens to 20s area. I think it's only because of the kind of risk of the twin factor and what happens when you split them up that they might fall. So I would love the Sedins to make a splash. I don't think it's unrealistic, especially with the connection of Jake DeBrusk to Ottawa. But even if they can't make that trade happen, I don't think it's completely out of the question.
Okay, so then very quickly, do you think they get drafted by the same team? It doesn't matter regardless of the team.
This is another one where if you make me pick the odds, I'm going to go almost 50-50 here. I'll say like 60% that they don't, simply because the odds are so difficult for a team to be able to get both of them. Realistically, when you look at the teams that have 2 picks in the kind of first round / very early second, it's the Caps, the Blues, the Canucks, and the Flames. And the thing is with both the Caps and the Blues is the higher of those picks is probably higher than either one wants to take the Ruck Twins. And that's why I say it's probably either the Canucks or the Flames. The reason why I think that, only having an odd of 2 NHL teams getting it done, the reason why I still think the odds are pretty close to 50-50 are the Canucks and the Flames would be 2 teams that are incredibly interested in making that happen. So I don't think it's unrealistic. I especially think that the fact that they said at the Combine to every NHL team they talked to that, hey, we want to get drafted by the same NHL team helps those odds. So honestly, I think it could happen. I think the factor of teams being wary of what are these guys going to look like without their twin, we've never seen them without it. Looking back all the way to U13, they've always played together. So I think that teams with that risk would maybe consider it. The alternative is if, the Canucks or the Flames take one of the Ruck Twins at 24, 33, whatever pick it is whether another team decides to take the other one as a bit of a trade leverage. So we'll see. I think the odds are pretty close to 50-50.
And very quickly as well, the 2 Vancouver Giants that are supposed to go in the first round, like obviously one of them is in that range of the Canucks could take them in Mathis Preston. And obviously the other one being who was supposed to be one of the top guys, top D-men in this draft class as well, in Ryan Lynn. How do you see them going out? How do you see them as going to be future NHLers, as prospects? And what are your thoughts on just these guys for the local community that might be watching?
When we look back, Ryan Lynn could end up being another guy who ends up being one of the steals of the draft. He's not really considered in that same tier. Well, by some he is, but he's not necessarily right up there with Reed, Karls, Verhoff. You don't see a whole lot of people saying he's going to be the best defenseman in this draft. He should very much still be in that same tier. He's a dynamic puck mover. He's also an incredible leader. He was one of the guys that reportedly interviewed the best at the Combine. Teams came away loving Ryan Lynn, and they should. He's awesome. I've had the privilege of watching him a couple times out at the LEC, and he has such great vision on the ice. He's got a great hockey IQ. He's good enough defensively to make up for the fact that he is an incredible offensive defenseman. So I really like Ryan Lynn. I don't think he's a realistic option for Vancouver. He'll be gone before they pick Mathis Preston. Now, Mathis Preston, for my money, is who the Canucks are going to take at 24th overall. If you made me say this is who Vancouver will take, that is Mathis Preston. And I like that pick. He's so fast. He absolutely flies up and down the ice. He's also someone that does a great job at getting the puck from the perimeter into the middle. He can set up plays. He can drive the offense as well. He's not necessarily going to be a guy who's going to win every board battle, but the speed really makes him a big, big threat through the neutral zone. And that's something that Vancouver desperately needs is speed. I mean, there's so few guys on this Vancouver team, at least especially up front, that can skate like Mathis Preston does. And that's why I think that they will take him at 24th overall if they don't go with someone like the Rucks, or if Preston doesn't go earlier than that. But I think he'll be right around that range. We know the Canucks have scouted Preston. That's already been 100% reported, albeit, they're going to do their due diligence on anyone in the first round.
Yeah.
But Mathis Preston, I love that name. I think he's a guy that would make a lot of sense for Vancouver. And you mentioned it. It would be great for him to be able to go from the hometown WHL team to the hometown NHL team.
All right, final question, and we got to talk about it. You alluded to it earlier. The whole Americans, do we draft Americans? And my brother and I, we discussed this again with our reaction to the Brady Tkachuk trade. And we said it there. We're like, okay, if there's a player available, regardless of country, like you said about the Swedish players earlier, you take them. And now, obviously, we had the whole, do you draft Russians in the past? Do you draft now? It's kind of gone to the do you draft Americans? The best way I could put it is if there is a tie or like close enough prospect, then obviously go with the other guy. But like, if, for example, Toronto's picking first this year, 10 years ago, they had the same decision with Austin Matthews, American, joining a Canadian team. If a guy like Austin Matthews is available, you can't pass up on him, right? Because like at the end of the day, you deal with that when it comes to their second contract. That's when usually the whole drama comes in about the American players. When they're about to reach their second contract is when a lot of these guys want out. But is this more, in your opinion, just the vocal minority saying that the Americans do not want to play in America or in Canada anymore? How much of it is a media thing? How much of it, because we did see a Canadian in Mitch Marner leave Toronto and he could not live up to the pressure of his hometown team ultimately. What are your thoughts about drafting Americans in the first round in general when it comes to Canadian teams?
Well, I think it's one of those things where it started being kind of a little bit overrated. Oh, a couple Americans asking out of their teams for understandable reasons. Like Quinn Hughes, it's understandable he wanted out of Vancouver considering everything that's happened. I don't need to explain it to you. But now we're seeing so many more. The reports of Connor Hellebuck maybe leaving. Austin Matthews, every single offseason, it feels like you hear rumors about him. Now Brady Tkachuk. I think that you are starting to have to consider that as a possibility. And so for me, that is a question that I would ask prospects in the draft. It's just, hey, how would you feel about spending your entire career in Canada? Are you going to be okay with getting up at 5 a.m. in November when it's negative 15 out, walking to your car, having to shovel the snow to get to the practice facility? Is that something you're okay with? Because some players, understandably, you're going to say no. You know what? I think that it is fair enough that players, when they've got, one career, one life, want to play wherever they want to play. Sure. Player autonomy, I get it. But then it's also one of those things where it's fair enough for a team to say, well, we don't want to only get 5 or 6 years out of you. If we're drafting you in the first round, especially if it's a top 10 pick, we ideally want you to be a player with us for life. That's the ideal scenario with any top 10 pick. And so I think that the Americans, it's not all of them. That's something that people definitely need to remember, is that it's not all of them. There's still plenty of Americans that are happy being on Canadian hockey teams and are happy representing Canada. However, it's certainly some. And I've seen some people saying, well, Chase Reed's not going to do that. He's been a career OHLer. He's played a lot of junior hockey in Canada. You know who else did? Matthew Tkachuk. Yeah. And he's not the only one. There's plenty of other examples. So I think it's one of those things where you can't overrate it or underrate it. You should rate it exactly what it is, which is much like if you believe in the sweet fatigue, it's just one small, tiny deciding factor in what has to be a very larger overarching decision. You cannot let the nationality, no matter what it is, no matter what you believe in it, decide between two prospects unless it is literally a tie-break decision. If two prospects are tied, sure, you want to factor that in, be my guest. But I don't want to see a team picking a Canadian player that they think is worse solely because they think it's more likely that they'll stay, unless they know for whatever reason that American player only wants to play in America. There have been a lot of players who have done that, like Adam Fox, completely sewering Calgary they got next to nothing in a trade return. There could be some American players in the draft that do that to the teams, but we don't know, and we don't want to unfairly put things on American players that don't feel that way.
And to be fair to Chase Reed, he was on Donnie and Dolly recently and did say that like he played for the Sioux, so he knows what it's like to play in Canada, obviously, at the end of the day. So what you're saying is if Austin Matthews 10 years ago, if this climate was back then, you would be taking Austin Matthews if you were to try to make
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, no, like it is an intriguing time for sure, because like literally locally, the Golden Knights did pick what's supposed to be a generational talent, Carroll and Harvey.
Well,
and obviously
more than supposed to be.
Yeah, and the PWHL is obviously different than the NHL in terms of the rules and all that at the moment. But, you know, the jokes are, in 4 or 5 years time, she's going to go wherever she is from. So we'll see if that ends up happening over there. But Zach, overall, appreciate you taking the time. This was so much fun. We could tell that you are very passionate about the prospects, the way you do it. And we learned a lot as well. My brother's obviously sitting on the side, learned a lot as well. Before we let you go, though, where can people find you if they have any questions, check out your content and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me online at Zach Clarke PXP. You can find my show on Sportsnet 650 and the Sportsnet Radio Network and the Sportsnet website. I host Prospect Central, usually every Saturdays, unless there's some crazy stuff going on. Yeah, it's been a whole lot of fun getting that going. You can find more prospect and draft coverage every Saturday. I'm Rit Jovan. Thank you so much for having me on. As you said, this was a whole lot of fun. Always love chatting prospects, and hopefully I'll be back on again sometime.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely get you on. We'll see how this draft ends up going. We appreciate you once again. And for everybody watching, make sure you guys check Zach's stuff linked down below. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, because we'll be dropping more content for you guys as well. As the NHL has a big offseason coming. Other than that, we appreciate everybody, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.